We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us on this Monday. Nick Barris here along with Assistant District Attorney Chad Jackson in Davidson County. He, of course, was leading the prosecution of RaDonda Vaught, who was convicted this past Friday in a controversial case. A lot of reaction to it after the fact. And we're on Facebook at newschannel5.com. We're going to get to the phone calls here in just a moment. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you coming on this morning, Chad. One other question. I know that the DA's office had made a comment after the fact about the makeup of the jury. You know, we're seeking to see if some jurors will talk to us. We have not been able to reach them yet. If they're willing to, we'd love to talk to them to get their take on how they came back with this verdict. But the makeup of it, I think you've said that there were some medical professionals on, and I think a lot of viewers are wondering, well, what do you mean medical professionals? And I guess if there's a nurse on the jury, someone might say, wow, a nurse voted to convict here. What can you tell us about the jury?
That's exactly the case. That one juror was a nurse.
Do we know what type of nurse or how long ago or what she was involved with?
I don't want to get too much into detail, but she did work with patients. So she was actually in healthcare, administered medications. And another juror, I believe, had about 14 years of experience worth of healthcare as well. So we had two of those individuals that were on the jury that voted to convict RaDonda Vaught.
Okay, and again, the jury chosen here in Davidson County.
Yes.
And the trial was about, what would you say, 4 days or so, I guess, the way it broke down?
It was 3 full days.
3 full days, and then the jury deliberated for some 4 hours, which is not a long time for a jury to deliberate. They did come back not guilty of reckless homicide. What was your take on that?
I thought it was appropriate and fair under the circumstances. They heard the evidence. They couldn't determine that she consciously disregarded the consequences of her actions, and I think that's perfectly fine for them to have found that she was criminally negligent and falling and deviating so far from the standard of care that it was criminally negligent for her to have done that.
We know that prior to this, she had lost her license. She was, no longer now she has a felony on her record.
Yes.
But I mean, some are saying, wouldn't it be enough under these circumstances civilly to, she loses her license and can no longer practice. But you felt in the DA's office that punishment was warranted.
Right. Well, the law applies to everyone, whether you're a nurse or not, whether you're a lawyer or a doctor or just anybody else on the street. We can't pick and choose when somebody acts this egregiously just to give them a pass because they're a nurse. And I want to reiterate, this has never happened before. This is not a watershed event, but a pinnacle event in the fact that RaDonda Vaught did so many things wrong that it could not be excused, and the jury agreed with that.
So you don't believe that this verdict in a case like this, which you are correct, is very rare. That's one reason the whole country was watching, sets a dangerous precedent where all of a sudden now a bunch of nurses are going to be prosecuted criminally for mistakes they make.
No, that is not what this case is about at all. It is important to understand that so many things happened that could have been prevented by Ms. Vaught. It was not just a simple mistake. It was a culmination of many things she did. As my analogy to the jury was, she was driving with her eyes closed. And there's no excuse for that. If you're driving down the road and you close your eyes and you intentionally careen down Broadway and kill somebody, that's a crime.
Okay, let's take a few phone calls. We'll start off with Jared. Jared, good morning. Hi, Jared.
Hi, how are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
Hi, I got a question for you, Chad. Hi, Chad, you also know me as much as I'm listening. I'm the dictator of the house, etc. I'm all over TikTok and I'm all over your Facebook. Question for you. You were aware that Dr. Zimmerman signed a death certificate 2 years ago? That was incorrect, and he's the one who signed this one, am I right?
Yes, he did sign the death certificate.
Right, and he falsified a death certificate 2 years ago. Anyway, I just moving on from that really quickly.
Hey, Jared, we're having trouble. You on a speakerphone? We can barely hear you. You got to clear up your line, or we're going to have to move on. Can you talk directly into the phone?
Can you hear me better?
Okay, that's better. Go ahead. Speak into the phone. Okay.
Got it. So, I guess my second question is when originally before the third quarter was Vanderbilt and when CMS got involved, RaDonda Vaught was actually cleared by the Board of Nursing. Now, the Board of Nursing has not come out to say why they reversed their decision. My question for you is why did you insist that the Board of Nursing do their disciplinary process before you charging a clerk court? Was it because RaDonda Vaught could have got up there to plead the fifth and you needed to circumvent that with the disciplinary board's action? Because you brought that in court.
Okay, it had something to do along the lines with the license, and I'm sorry, I couldn't make out everything he was saying there.
Trouble too.
But was there any, the fact that, originally I think that, there was a complaint filed ultimately that then led to the license being revoked, I suppose. Did that have any bearing on your prosecution? What happened to her on that? You were completely separate from that?
No, yes, completely. This came to us from the TBI when they got the tip, and CMS was investigating because no one at this point had known that there was a patient death related to the medication error.
Okay.
So that's why the nursing board then went back and had to reinstitute proceedings, because it was not previously known to them. Because the issue we had with Dr. Zimmerman and the death certificate was RaDonda Vaught never scanned the medicine into the electronic medical record, or the medical record, the MAR is what we called it. And so no one saw that vecuronium bromide had been given. So there was all the confusion during all of this about how Charlene Murphy died. And it was not till later cleared up with, and it was still never in the record.
Okay.
So it was cleared up by her admission, saying this, showing the vecuronium, seeing the vecuronium, admitting that she'd given it, then the interviews that came after that. So it took a while to figure out actually how she died. But it was never officially in the record, and Dr. Zimmerman could only opine from the record, and doctors can only give a death certificate of natural causes.
And Vaught, we heard some of the audio. I mean, she was upfront about what happened when she was confronted, and she you could tell she was very, very upset. Some people are wondering, because of the way that played out, that was all on what she did or didn't do, as opposed to a, quote, cover-up by Vanderbilt, in your opinion?
Yes. I saw no evidence of a cover-up from Vanderbilt with anything. I mean, but we were looking at this event regarding Charlene Murphy and RaDonda Vaught.
Okay. Let's go next to Ann. Ann, good morning. Go ahead, Ann.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First, let me say that I only saw one day of testimony. Second, I am a retired neurocritical care nurse. And third, I disagree with the verdict or the fact that I feel she knows exactly what she did. But bottom line, when I retired from nursing, one, a doctor had to write an order for a medicine, and two, a paralytic was never released from the pharmacy or an automatic dispensing anything unless it was released from the pharmacy. And I know that into the medicine field in 2017, you didn't get your hands on a paralytic without it coming from an automatic dispensing system or the pharmacy.
So what's your question, Ann? What's your question?
My question is, was there a look into that system, and two, was there never a plea deal? Because I feel like she would have accepted one.
Okay, thank you for your questions. Did you look into the system again that was having problems? I mean, it was documented that Vandy had some issues where, doctors and nurses were having to kind of sometimes, go around what the AccuDose machine was able to deliver.
Well, that was actually a misconception during the trial, because there was a downtime for the AccuDose system at Vanderbilt because they were merging the electronic medical records. Terry Bozen testified that for 13 days they had to override almost everything, but even at that time the override rate was only 6%. So there was not an issue with the ADC at all in this situation. Later, Vanderbilt took it so that you couldn't, or removed the override function for vecuronium, because this happened, and I guess now it's foreseeable that somebody could possibly try to type in VE in the wrong side of the AccuDose machine and pull the wrong medicine. But before this, no one imagined that someone could search improperly for the name, the incorrect name, in the wrong field, and then not pay attention to the medication you're selecting as you're having it dispensed from the cabinet.
Okay, she was supposed to, just for folks who maybe did not know the details of the case, the patient was supposed to be given something to calm her nerves before she had to go have a scan.
Right.
Okay, that would have relaxed her. Instead, she was given a paralytic, which essentially did what?
It started to paralyze her extremities within probably 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And it eventually moved up through her entire body to where she was awake and alert, but couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and she eventually suffocated.
So the nature of the medicine, eventually, as it moved up, she was paralyzed, couldn't call for help, and it shut down her ability to breathe. And
Yes.
she basically suffocated while she was conscious.
She suffered.
Or do we know she was conscious? I
She
don't
was
know.
awake. When you have vecuronium, you are alert and awake while this is all going on until you die.
Did the ME determine what the cause of death is? Did she die from that administration of the drug?
The death certificate signed by the medical examiner was acute vecuronium intoxication that led to her death.
All right, let's go next to Haley. Haley, good morning. Go ahead, Haley.
Hi.
Hi.
I am a nurse, actually, and I did watch and listen to part of the trial. And I actually have a two-part question. So I was there when you had the press conference after the trial, and you said in your own words that this was not an attack on the nursing community, but rather the consequences of the actions of one nurse. What I want to know is, how can you sit there and honestly believe that when you said yourself that she was a help all, which is the nature of being a nurse, to help? So what my question is, with what precedent did you feel comfortable to bring forth criminal charges against a nurse when no criminal charges have been brought against a nurse for an accidental medication error that they admitted to previously? And why did you instead not try to work with proper channels to change laws about the way that paralyzing agents are dispensed?
Okay.
I'll start with the second part. It's not my job to change the laws. The legislature sets the laws. Prosecutor has to enforce them dispassionately and fairly. And in this case, based on the way the statute for gross neglect of an impaired adult is written, it fit the facts. She fell so far below the standard of care that it seemed to fit, and we were going to put this case in front of a jury and let them decide. And I forgot the part one
Well,
of your
kind of
question.
like, not an attack
Well, the precedent for
Right,
this.
you're right.
And it was not an attack on the nursing community. RaDonda Vaught did at least 17 different things wrong.
We have some of those that you listed, and some of them, people may dispute. I don't know if we have the different ones that we can put up. I think we were making some graphics of it. But go ahead and talk. Can you read that off the screen? That
Sure.
the viewers seeing that. So this is what you're saying. She did wrong. It wasn't just one or two things.
Right. She took the wrong drug from the ADC, the automatic dispensing cabinet. That was the end result of everything she did while she was there. That she should have been aware that she knew she was wrong. Because she didn't properly search for the medicine in the ADC. She was on the generic side, and she's searching for midazolam, which is the generic name for Versed, but she types in Versed. So if it's automatically populating, it's only going to pull up medicines with a VE. So the next thing that comes up is vecuronium.
Okay, and run through these quickly.
Sure. So she overrode the computer when she couldn't find it in the patient's profile, but it was already in the patient's profile and had been for 10 minutes. So she clearly didn't look at the computer. She failed to verify it with the pharmacy after she says she couldn't find it in the patient's profile, and then she typed in the incorrect name. When the name came up of the most close drug to VE, it said vecuronium bromide, and she didn't look at the screen as she selected that. Then the drawer opens and pops, a cabinet comes out, and there is a warning, paralyzing agent, on the pocket drawer. It's an orange sticker that we showed to the jury. She pulls the medicine out. There's more stickers underneath the medicine that she grabbed, didn't pay attention to those. And she takes the medicine and never verifies the medication she just pulled out of the drawer. She had an orientee with her who was a nurse. He could have easily verified the medication for her and helped her, and then I can keep going if you want me to run down.
I think we've shown a lot of those there. I have some people on Facebook and others who have contacted me since I've posted, who are nurses actually, who have seen that list, who really paid close attention to the trial. I don't think there's a single nurse out there that likes to see another nurse being prosecuted criminally. They don't. But some of them have said, boy, when I first heard this case, I was outraged. But then when I saw the details of just how beyond the pale it was, some of, and maybe we'll get a caller that says this, recognized that, this is an outlier. It's so beyond what maybe I would have done that I can understand why charges might have been brought. Again, you go to this, and people may be very angry who didn't like this with the DA's office for bringing the charges, but ultimately it was a jury of peers chosen here in Davidson County that took only 4 hours to convict.
Right.
I don't know. And I'll be honest, I did not get to watch every bit of the trial either. I think most people who are commenting did not get to watch every bit of it, but still some very strong opinions. And listen, we've got more coming your way. We're going to take a break. The number 737-7587. We'll get to that, more of your phone calls with our guest this morning as we're talking about the RaDonda Vaught verdict. This is Chad Jackson. He's the assistant district attorney who prosecuted, trying to answer some of your questions as we go to the break. To remind you, we hope to have members of the Tennessee Nursing Association on this week. Also, we're reaching out to RaDonda Vaught herself and her attorney, Peter Stryance. We hope to have them. We're doing individual shows on this to cover it as best as we can as the fallout continues. We'll be back with more right after this. All right, we are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Chad Jackson with us, Assistant District Attorney here in Davidson County, headed up the prosecution of RaDonda Vaught, who was convicted this past Friday of criminally negligent homicide, gross negligence of an impaired adult, and the 2017 death of Charlene Murphy, who was given the incorrect drug. A lot of reaction after the fact of the verdict. And again, going to the point, and we talked a bit about this during the break, just to show for, some people want to see the rest of it. My first question this morning was how the DA determines, the difference between criminality and professional negligence. You hit on a few of the items, a few of the things, and we can show the rest of them. Some 17 mistakes you say she made, which is what led to the level, you say, that you decided you should bring criminal charges.
Well, the grand jury heard the information first and issued the charges. I took the case and decided that this was egregious enough that it probably did need to go to a jury.
All right, and we showed the first half of that. I think we have another, just to finish it off, to give people an idea, and you may agree or disagree with what some of these are, or what are some of the others there. Did not scan the medication and the patient waistband prior to giving the drug?
Yes, she failed to verify that she had the proper patient in front of her, and then didn't scan the wristband, didn't scan the medication, which would have then gone back into the system and shown that the becronium bromide had not been ordered for the patient. So then she did not check the medication name on the vial, which is important to do, especially when you're reconstituting a medication like this, which Versed does not require reconstitution, which should have been another red flag for her that something was amiss in this situation. But as I explained earlier, the warning sign on top of the cap would have been noticed 3 separate times during the reconstitution process, but she failed to do that and didn't pay any attention to the warning on the label. Also, she didn't check the patient's vitals before giving the drug. Versed is a sedative. Therefore, she should have checked the blood pressure to see if the patient was okay. She didn't monitor the patient for the reaction to the drug. And important here was the order was for 1 to 2 milligrams. So 1 initially, another one if she needed more. But Ms. Vaught gave the medication. The testimony was pretty clear, extremely clear, that she immediately walked out of the room and left. So she didn't see if the second milligram or milliliter of the vecuronium or the Versed was needed based on if the first one worked or not. And she should have waited for the reaction time, which would have been 3 to 5 to 10 minutes, to see if that worked. But instead, she left, didn't monitor the patient's vitals after, which she should have checked blood pressure, pulse ox, and things of that nature, and then left Charlene Murphy alone in a room with no proper supervision.
You know, I'm wondering, and as you see that list, you can say, okay, most people would look at that and say, wow. I'm wondering, though, when this first happened and you started getting some of these details, you know, you're not a medical expert, I'm not a medical expert. Did your office consult with some within the medical community to say, look, we're trying to decide what to do here. This is what we know. Is this standard of care? Or what kind of feedback did you get from maybe nurses and others when you said, look, how bad is this?
Right. We did. The TBI interviewed several nurses, many. The Department of Health interviewed maybe 30 nurses, all surrounding this event, to get the facts. We did consult with an expert, Donna Jones, who testified in our case, and she agreed with us that this was extremely egregious, and there was no excuse for what RaDonda Vaught did.
Let's go next to Catherine. Catherine, good morning. Go ahead, Catherine.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
I had 2 questions for you. The first one is, how exactly did we end up with this nursing expert testifying? Like, what were her credentials, or how did we determine that she would be the expert to testify? But looking at the bigger picture, what did we gain from this?
Okay.
What is the going forward with any of this? As a nurse, why? The family didn't want this. It feels like a re-traumatization of the family, of RaDonda, and it just feels incredibly unnecessary. She's not a threat to anyone. Why did the DA choose to convict or take this and prosecute in this situation?
Okay. Do you want to address on the family first? What contact did you have? Is she correct when she says the family did not want a prosecution?
Right. Well, I'd like to address the fact that her not being a threat to anyone, she was a threat to Charlene Murphy that day. And Charlene Murphy is dead because of that. And that's something that as a prosecutor we have to look at. I have to look at that family, and we did. They were there for the entire trial. And this rumor and narrative going around that the family didn't want her prosecuted is untrue. They forgave RaDonda Vaught because they said Charlene Murphy would have forgiven her. But they still wanted justice because RaDonda Vaught killed their beloved family member, and she died prematurely and unnecessarily as a result of her gross neglect.
Okay. A lot of people, too, saying, you know, all right, we hear this, but on Facebook I see time and again people saying that this prosecution is an attack on the nursing industry and that the DA's office doesn't understand just the difficulty of the job that nurses face these days, and that, you know, it's RaDonda Vaught doesn't work in a vacuum. It's a team issue, and a lot of people upset that maybe, you know, Vandy wasn't held more accountable.
There's nothing, and I said it in my arguments as well, there's nothing that Vanderbilt could have done in this situation that would have kept RaDonda Vaught from killing Charlene Murphy, because RaDonda Vaught was not paying attention to anything she was doing. She didn't even check the medication. That is paramount. Before you administer a drug to somebody, you should at least look at the vial. And every nurse from the state side, and even the defense's nurse, the witness, agreed that she would have at least checked the medicine, and then that would have alerted her that this is not Versed. I'm giving the wrong medicine. RaDonda Vaught didn't even give Charlene Murphy that basic care in checking the medicine, and now she's dead because of it.
Let's go next to Holly. Holly, good morning. Hello, Holly.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a few questions, but I am going to initially refer to your quote of, this is the only case that I'm aware of that there is a patient death as a result of such a medication error combined with everything RaDonda Vaught did. So I'm just wondering how much research you did on medication errors. Recent studies of medical errors have estimated errors may account for as many as 251,000 deaths annually in the U.S., making medical errors the 3rd leading cause of death. At the same time, less than 10% of medical errors are reported, and that's from PubMed. Of these 251,000 deaths, every year 7,000 to 9,000 Americans die as a result of medication errors. So you're saying this is so rare and this is so out of the norm, but people who work in healthcare and nurses know that unfortunately that's not true.
Hey, Holly, can
And-
I ask you a question? Are you a nurse, Holly?
Yes,
Okay,
I am a
just
nurse.
and I'll let him answer your question. You make some good points here. I'm just curious. I've heard that time and again, and I definitely hear your point, and you're absolutely right. There are mistakes all the time. My question, just as a layperson looking at this, it's like one or two mistakes, or gosh, when it's misprescribed, you're absolutely right. But is there a level where, you know, and you heard him run off the 17 mistakes that she made. I mean, at what point do you say, that's just too much ignored? I mean, not every single case you quote there had dozens potentially of mistakes made. It may have been 2 or 3 where it was miswritten or a mistake there. And yes, of course those happen. But I mean, it seems like, does it not matter how many signs or things were missed?
Well, I think that's a great point. And when you bring up there is nothing Vanderbilt could have done to keep Redonda Vaught from killing Charlene Murphy, it's clear you don't work in the medical field and that you've never given medications. You've never dealt with interface issues between medications and charting systems, or short staffing, or being pulled out of your role to give medications in a different environment without a medication scanner, and even having to get orders for a medication that you have to override. I mean, there are layers upon layers upon layers. And to put that at the feet of one nurse, when we all know the complex system of giving medications and working at Vanderbilt, not that I do, but people know what the system is like. And this is a cultural norm these days.
Okay, and we have a lot of calls, but listen, I think she's giving voice to what a lot of people are saying I see as well on Facebook here, which is just that. It's like there's a misunderstanding here about how and why this happened, and it's much larger than Redonda Vaught.
And it could be, but in this case, some of the issues that she was talking about, it not being the connectivity issues, and those facts were not in this case. There were no connectivity issues. She was not overworked. Vanderbilt was not understaffed. She admitted in her interview that she was not tired. She was a help-all nurse, had nothing else, and she had a second nurse with her that could have helped her verify the medicine. And she was just so blind to everything she was doing that led to the death of Charlene Murphy, and the jury agreed with that.
4 hours of deliberation, came back with the guilty verdict after a more than 3-day trial. We'll take a break. When we come back, our final segment, more of your phone calls. We'll take a look at some of the questions as well on Facebook. Again, to remind everyone as we go to a break, we're seeking out to talk to the Tennessee Nursing Association this week. Also possibly Peter Stryance and his client, Redonda Vaught, if they're willing to come on. We have some attorneys as well. Clint Kelly, malpractice attorney, coming on. We'll talk about that this week. Just so you know, we're covering all bases on this. We'll be back with more with our guest this morning, Chad Jackson, the prosecutor, right after this. Well, we are back on Morning Line. It's our final segment this morning with Chad Jackson, Assistant Davidson District Attorney, who prosecuted RaDonda Vaught. A lot of people commenting on this. Some people saying this is damage control for the DA's office. So I think the DA wants to answer questions. That's why we're having them on. Trust me, I'm not here to do damage control for anyone. As I said, we're going to have the Tennessee Nurses Association on, provided they're willing to come on, as well as possibly RaDonda Vaught and her attorney, Peter Stryan. So don't give me any of that crap. Okay, that's not what that's all about. We're trying to cover every base here, and a chance for you to ask questions. We've got a lot of them, so let's get back to the phone lines, and we'll go next to, I believe, Rebecca. Rebecca, good morning. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi.
Hey.
So my name is Rebecca Boynton. I am the director of the Richland Park Farmers Market, as well as the East Nashville Farmers Market. And that means that RaDonda and her husband Ed are our farmers, and they mean a lot to us. So this prosecution has not only hurt the nursing community, it has also damaged the local Tennessee farming community. And so my question for you, Chad, is that when you have, let's say, thousands and thousands of nurses, who are mostly women, telling you that this could have been them, that this could have been a mistake that they made, that they are RaDonda, how can you possibly tell them that they're wrong?
Okay, thank you for your call. Thank you for your call.
Well, I have talked to lots of nurses, and even during the trial, we talked to several nurses from the stand who agreed that they would have at least checked the medicine. They would have at the very least checked the medicine. And in these cases, you know, nurses have a duty of care, and you cannot engage in gross neglect. And gross neglect is what the trial focused on, not simple negligence, not just one error or mistake, but many of them. And I have yet to find anybody that would go through this laundry list of things that RaDonda Vaught did and say, no, your verdict is unjustified.
Let's go next to Angela. Angela, good morning. Hi, Angela.
Hi.
Hey, what's on your mind?
Hi, I have two questions,
Okay.
if you're able to. First one is, there's a big term in healthcare, just culture. How would you define this for those that aren't aware of this term? And how was this upheld in the RaDonda Vaught case?
Did you say, you said just culture?
Yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
How was it upheld in this case?
All right. Thank you for your call.
Well, my understanding of just culture is in the healthcare community, everybody wants to be forthright about the mistakes because you need to correct them. You need to figure it out. You need to, if a patient is experiencing some sort of traumatic experience, in this case, Charlene Murphy, the doctors need to know what happened. So everybody would come forward and kind of say, I did this, this, this. And in this case, RaDonda Vaught did admit that she gave vecuronium bromide instead of Versed. So that helps the healing process in the medical community so that they can recover from the mistake, possibly save this patient if there has been such an error as this, which it was possible in this case. Had RaDonda Vaught monitored Charlene Murphy, there is a drug that could be given to reverse the effects of vecuronium bromide. Had she only noticed sooner, Charlene Murphy could still be alive before she suffered a noxic brain injury. And this trial was not necessarily, or wasn't about at all, just culture or an indictment of just culture, but the recklessness leading up to it. We don't want to discourage nurses from admitting to their mistakes that they make, but in this case, it wasn't just one. It wasn't just, I accidentally gave vecuronium bromide. I didn't do so many things, and I gave this patient vecuronium bromide.
All right. Let's go next to try to get as many calls as we can in our remaining moments, and we'll go to Amber. Amber, good morning. Hello, Amber. Here's your water.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Amber, and I'm a registered nurse. I'm actually calling out of New York State. So I want to say thank you for letting me on. I want Chad to realize that the American Nurses Association has spoke out about this case. And what they have said is that they really discourage attorneys from trying nurses criminally because this will end just culture within the medical field. Also, I've been following this case very closely, and the nurse expert, Donna Jones, she is a very sad excuse for a nurse. The fact that woman did not understand what just culture was, and quite frankly, she was absolutely aggressive on the stand. So her behavior in the courtroom was unjust, and I really have a problem that the jury was withheld a lot of information on Vanderbilt's history of cover-ups, on medication errors, on not doing a proper root cause analysis into why this accident, why this medication error occurred. Errors within facilities happen within systems. They don't happen just to one individual. There's usually a sequela of events that cause these instances. And while no one, not one medical professional would ever say that this event, it should just be dismissed. Someone died. And we have to identify the problems within Vanderbilt hospital system, and we need to do something to change that process. In addition, vecuronium, that should have never been in a Pyxis machine in a radiology department for a nurse to access. Okay, that medication is given in anesthesia. That is given during surgery.
Amber, hang tight on that, and great points. I'll let you comment since we only have about 3 minutes left. So on this, and again, she's giving voice to a lot of folks saying, look, RaDonda Vaught was part of this system, and the way it was set up, Vanderbilt is the one. And that's what Peter Stryance in his opening statement said on her behalf. Look, she's conceded to everything, but come on. This is about the culture of what she was working in there.
Right, and the word she used usually amounts to, there's a sequence of events and Vanderbilt or hospital is somehow involved. All these 17 events here relate specifically to RaDonda Vaught. The fact that vecuronium was inside that ADC, they have to intubate patients in the neuro ICU all the time if they're bucking the vent, if they're not relaxed enough and they're trying to fight the ventilator, they've got to do something to help facilitate that breathing process. So they need it there. And in fact, the evidence showed that RaDonda Vaught pulled rocuronium, which is another paralytic, many times. So they use paralytics in this neuro ICU, obviously, because RaDonda Vaught had used it. But, in this case, it was so egregious. I think every other nurse in this country needs to take solace and take comfort in the fact that if you follow the 5 rights and you check the medication and you're not overworked, you're not understaffed at the hospital, you're not on another multiple long day and you're being run into the ground, which was not the case here with RaDonda Vaught, you're going to be fine unless you commit gross neglect. And that applies for every person with a professional license. You cannot be grossly neglectful in your duties, especially in your duty of care to a patient.
And so again, just to reemphasize, if the many watching, and so many, especially nurses, very upset about this, that's the message they should take from this, so they should not be worried that this sets the dangerous precedent for them, looking over their shoulder, worried about every time maybe a mistake is made, and they do happen, we're all human, that they're going to be prosecuted.
They will be, if you commit a mistake, well, I'll say this, they don't need to be worried about, unless they're going to do 17 things wrong in the everyday administration of medication, like RaDonda Vaught did. This is not a national standard. Shirley Pickering said from the health department this was the first medication-related or patient death-related medication error that she'd seen in 15 years. And she'd been investigating for the Department of Health, Board of Nursing for 15 years, and this was the first one she had seen in Tennessee.
I appreciate you coming on, Chad. We'll follow how this goes along. Thank you for coming on to answer some of the questions and the like. And I know that we probably could have gone on a lot more calls. I apologize we couldn't get to you all. But this is not the end of it for us. We're going to be doing more as the week goes on, provided that the guests we invite are willing to come. And we're going to cover this from all sides. We'll take a break. I'll be back to wrap things up right after this. All right, that is a wrap. Our thanks to Chad Jackson, the Assistant District Attorney, for coming on to talk. Apologize we didn't get to all your calls, and an awful lot of people were following this on Facebook as well. Back tomorrow, we'll be doing more of a follow on this. As I say, the verdict came down Friday. We have the Assistant District Attorney on to answer many of the questions you have. We hope to have representatives on from the Tennessee Nursing Association. The invitation is out, ready for them to come on tomorrow, as well as Clint Kelly, malpractice attorney. We're reaching out to Peter Stryance, as well as RaDonda Vaught. They'll be welcome to come on. So, we're going to try to cover this from every angle, but each person will have an opportunity to be up here as they are alone, but taking questions, as many of you did call in and have strong opinions on this, which I certainly understand. It's something worth talking about. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow with much more on this as well. Please stay tuned to the News Channel 5 Network. And if you have questions, message me or comment at Nick Barris, NC5 on Facebook as well. I'll get back to you there. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you Tuesday morning.